Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Councilors of Real Estate and our current Global Chair, Anthony Delapelle, welcome to this presentation of Urban Challenges as the Death of Downtown Premature or Inevitable. Thank you for joining us. I'm John Henschel, CRE, First Vice Chair of the Councilors of Real Estate and President of Henschel Real Estate Services in Abingdon, Maryland. I apologize for no video, but we're having technical difficulties with my camera. So I'll just introduce it this way. The Councilors of Real Estate is a distinguished international group of accomplished advisors addressing real estate challenges worldwide. Experienced, innovative, and credentialed problem solvers, counselors reside in 22 countries, practice in many more, and offer expertise in 60 real estate disciplines across all asset classes. Each has earned and been conferred the prestigious CRE designation, a badge of distinction and a commitment to excellence. I would like to take a moment to recognize our exclusive sponsors for today's webinar: Husak Real Estate, Capright, Equus Capital Partners, JP Wigan and Sons, and WPJ McCarthy and Company. Our gracious thanks for your generous support. Before we begin, I'd like to offer you a free subscription to the Councilor's respected peer-reviewed digital professional journal, Real Estate Issues, which has been acknowledged as one of the top 10 essential real estate publications in the United States. If you don't already subscribe, please visit cre.org/REI. During the presentation, you're encouraged to utilize the Q&A feature should you wish to submit a question. Your participation is welcomed, and we'll try to answer as many questions as time permits. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Chuck DeRocco, Jr., CRE, who's Director of Research at PwC in Washington, D.C. A prolific author and speaker, Chuck imparts his research-backed expertise to institutional investors, pension funds, private equity firms, REITs, and the media. He was invited to counselor membership in 2011. Chuck also holds the CCIM designation and is a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. Welcome, Chuck, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks for that great introduction as well. Good afternoon to everyone to this panel. It's great to be speaking again with the counselors as well. And I think this webinar is going to be pretty exciting. And we have a fantastic panel. I have to admit, the title is a little frightening when you read it. Urban Challenges is the Death of Downtown Premature Inevitable. It's a little frightening when you say it out loud over and over again. But I think, in stepping back and having calls with our panel and getting everything together, I think we're going to get some really good insight from across the board from these three CEOs. So why don't we start right off the bat with an introduction. Kate, let me just turn it over to you. I think there's nothing better than probably you introducing yourself and tell us a little about you and what you do.
Right. Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. Yeah, you're right. The title is daunting, and hopefully we can flesh out some of the conversation behind the scenes. So my name is Kate Thompson. I'm the president and CEO of Calgary Municipal Land Corporation. We are in Calgary, Canada. So for all of those who know, that's north of Montana, and have kind of some different perspectives on what we're doing here. So the company I work with is overseeing about 500 acres in our downtown and revitalizing those areas. So we have over $1.2 billion worth of construction in design and construction of projects in our downtown. So acutely aware of all the challenges and opportunities in the downtown. We have a staff of about 38 doing all of that work and really championing what it's like to create larger infrastructure projects, but also housing and master planned communities. So looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Kate. Michael, how about you take it from there?
Chuck, thank you. Michael Smith, I'm the CEO of Charlotte Center City Partners. Thrilled to be serving on the panel today and talking to the counselors. We're a 46-year-old private not-for-profit. We're organized as a business improvement district in Center City, Charlotte, which includes our Uptown area, our South End district, and Midtown. And we're an economic and community development organization. We lead with research and urban design and planning, programming events, marketing, communications, and community development. Our purpose is the vibrancy of the Center City to serve as a foundation for a thriving region. We look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Eric?
Great to be with you all. Eric Larson. I am an undertaker. They needed somebody. Oh, I'm sorry. I was playing off the title. No, CEO of the Downtown Detroit Partnership. We're a 100-year-old organization that has been stewarding the core of our city, Detroit here, Michigan, for that entire 100 years. We combine quite a bit of advocacy for our community as well as urban planning, public space, maintenance and management and creation, as well as we run our business improvement zone. I also have a long career in the real estate industry and didn't know Kate, but spent a lot of time in Calgary when I was with the Heinz organization out of Houston for a number of years, and still have my own firm, Larson Realty Group, that is doing mostly work in and around the Southeast Michigan region. Look forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you all again for coming and meeting with us today, finding the time to do it. I think what was really interesting is when we started to have a couple calls to prepare for this webinar today, and I thought it was good to maybe come in with a different approach. It seems like when you talk about downtown, everyone goes right to the office, and the office talk is what it's about. And unfortunately, you see it repeatedly on CNBC, and they're not always real estate focused. So we thought we'd kind of step into it with something a little bit different. Kate threw me a bit of a curve because I am not a Canadian specialist at all. I like hockey. That's probably about as deep as I go, but it was fun still nonetheless to kind of put some stuff together and learn a little bit more about Calgary and Canada in general. So we're going to kind of step into it from a little bit of a different angle overall. I think all three markets that we're going to focus on are very unique. I think they all kind of have a different story. When I was kind of putting this together, I think they're all in a little bit different cycle, maybe. There's all these kind of things we're going to discuss as we move forward. We kind of want to start from really a more top-down approach, because you can talk about commercial real estate and how important it is, and that's what we talk about, and that's our day-to-day, but you really have to start to focus on demand drivers. And maybe we're not talking about tomorrow or next week or next month, but more in a long-term perspective. So we thought it would be interesting to kind of step a bit into population change, immigration, and migration. We start off on the left with the United States, the blue line. We can see pretty much steady declines since late 2021. We're starting to get a bit of an uptick. The orange line, which is natural causes, that's deaths and births. Yeah, that's declined during COVID. I think it's kind of hard to have any babies when you don't leave the house for a year and a half. So we obviously see that downtick, and it's starting to kind of come up a bit. But let's face it, the U.S. is an aging population. There's forecasts in 2040 that deaths are going to be greater than births. People are getting married later. People are having babies later, if at all. So it's kind of changed overall. The big jump, we won't get political, I promise, has been immigration. So it's been basically half of the U.S. population growth. Let's hop up to north. I was going to say down. North to Canada, population growth a little bit better, 1 to 1.5%. Big increase in 2022. Natural causes a little bit low, a little bit steady across the board with some growth. Net immigration, that was the big one, and that's jumped from around 50 basis points to 250 basis points where we're at today. So it's been the big surge that we've seen in the Canadian population. Domestic migration has been really big. So our publication at PwC is Emerging Trends in Real Estate. The last one that we did, the 2024 forecast, it's all about migration to Sunbelt and all those transitions. I think Charlotte, we see some of that. We saw some positive migration in the data in the table to the right, over 50,000 on the migration side. Detroit has lost some, unfortunately, but I think Detroit is doing much better than they were, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it, Eric. But big thing was Alberta province. It's the only data I could get, Kate, so I couldn't grab all the Calgary data. But a huge gain across the board, over 184,000. It's been mostly net immigration, and some limited domestic migration across the board. So let's dive into this, and let's just start off with you, Kate, right off the bat. We see Canada's population here. It's growing strongly. Do you think like central cities, because that's kind of what we're going to focus on here, can they capture a significant share of this growth, or do you think they're going to bypass these urban cores, and kind of what are you seeing in Calgary?
Well, I mean, what we're seeing is really exemplified in the graph that you're showing here. And you're right, Chuck, it's been a wild year for Alberta. And, the international migration is huge, and you can see it throughout our city and our province. But it's not to be downplayed by the domestic, which I'll just spend a minute on here. Is our province is if you do the arrows of where everyone's moving, you've got Ontario and British Columbia are other provinces, larger provinces in the country, and people are coming here in droves. So the question about are they going to bypass our downtowns really comes down to a question of affordability. Can we pen it out? And right now, with that number of net migration to our province, it's about, can we deliver rentals and new builds and new product that services that abundant need and quick need. And we all know that this industry is not fast. It takes some time to plan and build. And so we can't respond to that graph today, but we need to plan for it. So the affordability question comes down to construction costs. So it's pushing a lot of people as they move to the province to say, maybe it's not just inner core that we're looking at. Where's the best, highest value? And they're looking suburban. They're also looking kind of the satellite communities outside of our city, which I'm sure is similar to a lot of the panelists. And so that affects the pipeline to our downtown. So if we're seeing actually in Calgary, 60 people a day coming to our city. That's a lot of requirements for housing if you just start thinking of that. So although resale has started to take a stab at that market, there's limited supply of resale and rental. So yes, downtown will be a part of that solution if it can match the affordability question of those people coming to our province.
Okay, great. Let's jump over to Charlotte then, Michael, and ask you a couple questions. I think Charlotte's numbers were really good for the fact that we saw both domestic migration and natural causes. I don't know what you put in the water down there, but it looks like it's working out well for you. What do you think makes your city so appealing to kind of start your life in Charlotte?
Well, thank you, Chuck. It's definitely a part of our secret sauce as we continue to be a place that's attractive for migration. It's with the amount of job growth that we have, it has to be a part of the formula. We're one of a handful of Sunbelt cities that just continues to draw people for a variety of reasons. You know, the 50,000 from 22 to 23 put us as the sixth most out of any metro in the U.S. We've got about 113 people a day move into the region. We think it's a combination of relative affordability, and that relative is based on the other markets that are growing and where people are choosing to go and seek opportunity. We think the second thing is job growth. 22 to 23, we had 2.4%. We had 4% job growth, which was a decade high back. Actually, that was 22, 23. Both of these kind of put us in the top 10 in the U.S. You just have to continue to grow jobs, and so much of that ends up affecting our urban core. And you know, we're seeing our migration from cities like New York, Boston, Atlanta, Miami. We're also, we think there's a dynamic vibe that's attractive to young people. This is we seem to get younger and more educated with the influx of migration. And we're glad that a lot of that is from the appeal of CBD.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. Eric, let's go over to maybe the immigration side. We talked about U.S. immigration being obviously a key, portion of the population change. Are you or have you seen firms, real estate firms, adjusting kind of their development strategies to accommodate, immigrant communities? And Kay kind of brought it up a little bit. And if so, how are you seeing that being treated?
Yeah, Chuck, thank you for that. And I actually am somewhat pleased by this this chart, only because from over the last 50 years, Detroit has seen a drop from 2 million population to the 700,000 that we have currently, and we've now stabilized. And so our decline really has now started to stabilize, and some of that stabilization, as you can see, is through natural births, and that happens because we are actually a very affordable and a very attractive place for young families. We are not as attractive as those children age and get to school age. We also have continued to struggle, obviously, on the employment side, but are continuing to stabilize and start to make that turn. So if you actually look at the overall sort of net gain of population, we really are starting to pick up, and as a region within Southeast Michigan, we actually are growing, but not at the same levels as my colleagues here on this call. We are seeing, Chuck, to your point, a real lean into immigration, especially in Detroit. Many of the development community are focusing on things like that relate to cultural considerations. We have Hamtramck, which was historically a Polish enclave, is now really changing and converting to Arab American. The development community has created a whole host of cultural assets that support that community, including mosques and community centers. So there are infrastructure components that are being built. Southwest Detroit is traditionally a Hispanic community. We do a lot of things around language support, community integration, so that there is sort of an assembly of support structure for those that are immigrating to the city and to the country. And then, I think the other thing that we're seeing through the development community is not only a diversity of housing options, but also housing pricing. The city of Detroit has been very focused on making sure that any development that has any public support, whether it's through land or dollars, has a minimum of 20% affordability. And that is a key component to making sure that there is a diversity of income levels that really represents those that are ultimately immigrating and starting out a new life. So many different programs, Chuck, that I could talk about. Our financial institutions are focused on financial support and education. So again, lots of attention around the immigrant population, and we in Detroit really believe that that's a place that we can accelerate some of our growth by being open and inclusive.
That sounds fantastic. Kate, do you have maybe anything to throw out there too? Because I know the immigration's really big. You brought it up on the community side. Is there any more plans or anything like Eric maybe mentioned in Calgary? You're on mute, Kate. Sorry.
Had to be one of us. I took the hit for that. No, I was just saying, no, I'm writing down notes. It's an interesting, it's a challenge and an opportunity for us too. But one of the things for the immigration side of things, both net migration within the country and then general migration Canada-wide, is Alberta right now has that bar graph that it is because of the affordability versus other provinces. And so we are relatively lower percentage of wages used on primary residence and rent and the like. As soon as that starts to flip, then we're starting to be in a problem that we'll have that same level of migration and not being able to provide that affordability. And we're getting close to that right now in terms of our housing crisis. So some of the mentions that Eric had in terms of understanding what percentage of affordable housing can be brought out. We've had just one of the record longest city council public hearings on rezoning in our city, which was a flashpoint issue about how do we do it and what's the right policy incentives that actually enable densification of our core and growth of our city in general. And I think that divisive nature that you see in a lot of political discussions, yes, they happen north of the border as well. They're probably just a little bit gentler right now. It's still alive and well. And I think that it's something that we're struggling with in terms of what percentage, is it the 20%, is it 30%, and it needs to be affordable? And then the other question that we're tackling is what is affordable? Is it creating, because right now we need volume, and we need volume at all price points along the continuum. So how do you enable some middle market housing and lower income housing? So it's not any one solution.
Fantastic. Let's jump over, and I think some of you touched on it briefly anyways, but let's go over to this next slide, which is again about affordable housing. It's great to have people come to your market or your country, but the question then is, where do they live after that? And I know some of you touched on it briefly. This is just kind of a little bit of a cocktail napkin kind of calculation. We looked at median household income. We looked at median single family home prices, put 7% on it. If you can get 7%, now, how much of your income are you going to basically spend to buy a home, to buy a single family home? And just kind of a quick snapshot, Calgary and Charlotte, 44% of their income, Detroit, 27%, kind of golden rule is 28% of your income should only go to your housing expenses. I think everyone's been living beyond that for some time now in this kind of housing bubble that we've been going into. I threw a little rent chart at the bottom, which we can kind of see there's growth there, which we continue to see growth, I think, moving forward. Assuming, I guess, the more rental market might be Calgary and Charlotte, maybe there are more opportunities because some people have left Detroit, as Eric mentioned. Let's just jump over to you, Michael, really quick. When these residents face kind of this financial pressures, the unaffordable market, how is that impacting then commercial real estate downtown? You know, again, where this kind of theme is kind of going.
Yeah, Chuck, thank you. This is a huge topic. When you see out migration of talent, it's not often that people are choosing against density or against cities. It's often connected to affordability, and it's becoming an increasing threat. It used to be that talent wanted to move just to gateway cities, and now secondary and tertiary markets are getting more and more of the percentage of talent across North America, and it's exciting, but the threat is around affordability, and it comes down to supply. And we think that's a giant thing. In our center city, we've got 9,300 units either planned or under construction right now. And as that inventory comes online, even though we've got good population gains, because of the supply, rents have stabilized. They've even dropped a little bit. And it's allowed us to have relative affordability as compared to some of our competitive set. This is going to put a lot of pressure, though, because as folks move to try to find affordable housing, transportation systems are going to have to respond. And, you know, when it comes to just development and investment and pairing that with this issue of affordability, we're going to have to make sure that the office sector is really focusing on creating commute-worthy trips. And that's more than office. That's the entire environment that you can only get, you know, in a central activity district as opposed to a central business district. And, you know, we are having some that we're seeing convert that have been interesting, and they are responding in this way, trying to create just more active and complete places.
Great. We'll get into some conversion coming up, a couple more slides moving forward. Kate, let's jump over to you with the downtown affordability issue. And I know you briefly touched on it in the first slide, but how do you feel that could affect the sustainability and the vitality of those neighborhoods that you're kind of building? So it's like, the question would be, are people going to be priced out of it? Is real estate going to turn into a bubble, which, you know, the US, we deal with that all the time. So maybe that's going to happen to Calgary at some point. Can you still attract new people in when pricing is to another level? How do you keep that within the neighborhoods that you're building within your market?
Yeah, I mean, that's a multi-leveled question. That one of the big things is pipeline. I mean, in Alberta, which is very oil and gas heavy in its history and transitioning, we use the word pipeline a lot, but applying it to housing is really important. Without the strong pipeline, you can't have affordability. There's a theme to all of these conversations, is that you need to have that. And we don't really, at this time in Calgary has been an oil and gas town for years, decades. And we had one of the largest per capita office square footage compared to other downtowns. And we felt the effects of that earlier than probably other downtowns who are dealing with it after COVID. And we'll talk about incentives and stuff, I think, in future questions. But it is about, how do you rebalance that for the office and residential mix, and not to be either exclusively one or the other, to create a really 24-hour city. But one of the things that we touched about too is that you can't have attraction to downtown without safety. And I think all of us are dealing with safety. And so safety and vibrancy for us really equal activity. So the more people on the street, the more things to go to. Michael talked about a destination and transportation. These are all layered elements to creating a complete city, and having people be easy to move around, a reason to come downtown, and add to our vibrancy. And so, you know, increasing the pipeline and also increasing the feel that it is a destination, it's vibrant, it's safe, and give people a reason to come downtown and somewhere to stay. Those are the main pieces.
Eric, thank you. Eric, let me ask you this one, is that, you know, as we see this population slightly decline or finally become stabilized, as you mentioned, in Detroit, like, how are commercial real estate developers playing a role in addressing the housing affordability issue themselves? these challenges in revitalization, they're using underutilized properties. I mean, you have a big market, so I'm sure there's a lot of different direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting, Chuck, because obviously an older market, we've had a number of truly low income properties that now are coming to term, and so property owners and developers have self-imposed the sort of the requirement to keep that low income housing stock available as opposed to converting to market rate. That's really unique. It obviously is an individual decision because the market in Detroit is on an upward trajectory, and they could obviously extract some return if they were to convert, but they have chosen to that the diversity of income and the stock of diverse affordability is important to the sustainability and resiliency of our downtown. So that's been very interesting to watch, and to see the selflessness of some of the development community, not all, but some. We are absolutely focused on adaptive reuse, and I know Chuck will talk a little bit more about that, but we've already converted 27 of our older properties. We didn't have the same kind of run up that a lot of other cities did because of the demand on new construction. So while we didn't have the population growth, we didn't have the job growth, we also didn't have the removal of many of our older buildings, which actually from a core to curtain wall and overall floor plate configuration are very, very attractive to convert to residential or hospitality. And so we've seen 27 of those already converted successfully. We also are leveraging a lot of various programs, both local, state, and federal. We're working on federal legislation right now for obsolete building credits for office buildings 20 years or older. That will be very helpful to a downtown like Detroit, where there is some older office stock, and really converting. And then I think the big thing that we've demonstrated is, and I'll touch on it, when we get a little bit further in, but the public-private partnerships, they have been critical to our success, not only from a governmental, but also from a philanthropic community standpoint. We have very much focused on making sure that all three legs of that stool are in the game and contributing. We created a Live Detroit, Live Downtown, Live Midtown program where for $2,500 a new renter could get a discount, and for $25,000 a new buyer could get a down payment. And we saw huge increases in our residential population through programs like that were funded by our private, philanthropic, and public sector. So many examples like that, and each one has had varying success, but lots of innovation around how the development community is addressing that.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. I should have that migration number real time, because the numbers might be going up, Eric, the way you're selling Detroit right now. So that makes a ton of sense. Let's jump over to kind of these market snapshots. And it was just, I really, again, needed to step back, understand a little bit more of the markets, since Calgary's kind of in the mix. And I was curious to just taking some quick looks at it. How big is the market in size? And I thought it was interesting because we kind of have a smaller market, a medium market, and a large market. And then just what was going on in vacancy rates, as well as absorption, things of those nature over this period of time. And it was really kind of interesting because I really was curious then on the different approaches to handling downtown changes. You can see on office apartments, it's fairly similar in size. Industrial, Detroit, obviously stands out there. Charlotte does pretty well on that. So let me just go right to you, Eric, because you're the big one. So let's just start off with the larger. We've heard through all the years, bigger is better, bigger is better. But I would think in trying to revitalize downtown and seeing this disparity, what do you think might be the difference in kind of these cities' revitalization, since you're dealing with maybe the larger of the three?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Chuck, we've touched a little bit on it, and it is a bit of a catch-22. We just had an announcement where General Motors, who had acquired the Renaissance Center, which is a 5.5 million square foot complex, John Portman design, signature building on our skyline, is moving out and moving into a new tower that is being developed on an old department store site. That's going to leave a significant, amount of vacancy in a very critical building. And so it cuts a little bit both ways. I think it gets back to what I was saying just before, and that's that we are looking at ways to creatively reuse and adapt many of these older structures. I also think, from a Detroit perspective, downtown, similar to what Michael was saying, it holds an attractiveness that the suburbs of Detroit, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods, don't have, sort of in their repertoire. It is extremely walkable. We are continuing to invest in public spaces. We have a 10-minute walk criteria from for any resident to a green space. So we're being very deliberate about how we're building our network and connectivity of these various public green spaces. We have a new Joe Louis Greenways that's going to be an entire green belt all the way around the city that will touch on every neighborhood. We also have things like Strategic Neighborhood Fund, which originally picked 7 neighborhoods and then now has expanded to 3 more, so 10 neighborhoods, where we, unfortunately picked some winners and losers. And we decided that we were going to drive investment in areas where there was already a burgeoning both business and residential community, and continue to try and facilitate greater growth in those areas before moving on to other areas within the downtown and the city. That's been very successful. We've invested over $260 million in those neighborhoods, and are starting a 3rd fund on that initiative. So a lot of it is, Chuck, what we've been talking about. It's creating, identifying, the unique strengths, building on those unique strengths, and then ultimately creating an environment that is truly welcoming, clean, safe. I mean, Kate touched on it. I mean, our crime rates are at a historic low, 60-year historic low. That's very important in terms of making sure people are thinking about Detroit, and especially from a residential standpoint, differently than they were when it was just a commercial corridor.
That's great. I live right outside of DC, and I think our crime rates are going in the opposite direction, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So maybe this is actually good to go over to you, Michael, too, because I think that one other question that we kind of put together that makes sense for the Charlotte market is, are you seeing any like notable geographic clustering patterns, within your city, within your sectors? Because, Eric kind of touched on that a bit on how they're doing their developments. Are you seeing that? Does it lean more towards the stronger or the weaker, kind of those areas?
Yeah, so let me throw one thing out to Eric. Eric, you're working on that, the federal tools for conversion. Count us in, because you have family in North Carolina that is experiencing that. We've in this last cycle, we built 8 million square feet of new office since 2020, and that's great, and it's been attractive for retaining and attracting new, but it's big players making moves from older inventory, and part of that has taken the form of some geographic clustering. Now, it's growth, and it's into our south end, which is all contiguous to our uptown core. And what it's done is it's extended our CBD. And it's been exciting, but it's also left us with the challenge as well of, how are we going to meet this need? The south end, since 2018, it's one of a couple markets that's doubled in size, super hot, very attractive. It's what everybody wants to see when they come to town. 5 million square feet of new office. There's almost 300,000 under construction now. Exciting time, but it's all been in response to investment in transit infrastructure or light rail, good bike trails. But then the challenge that leaves behind is those places that are vintage office buildings that we're going to need to find solutions for. I don't think we have to find it for all of them, but a great term I've heard is urban acupuncture, where you find the right spots where you really need to make a difference, and then it creates ripples to bring health and vibrancy back to sub-districts. But then the other is those places that have a monofocus on office. It is the places that offer a more complete place, a central activity district. that we think are going to do the best. And our South End community has been a great example of that. And we're taking a lot of those lessons and applying them into our uptown.
Okay, fantastic. Let's jump into then, let's get over to the office. Since you all kind of touched on it a little bit here and there, I think this, of course, is where everyone maybe thought this call would go directly to. But again, we went in from a different direction. Is that I think there's really, I have to admit, when I put this together, I was a little more surprised than I wasn't, because it just didn't really make sense. I assumed that all the downtown vacancy rates were going to be higher than the suburbs. I just kind of assumed that that's the way it was going to roll. And not here. It was really only Calgary. Sorry, Kate, that one that kind of stuck out there more across the board. But we'll talk about that in a second.
What you're saying is we were winning this graph.
Oh, yes, if that's the way you want to view it. It must be a Canadian thing, because yeah, it's I like the way the positive thinking.
There you go.
The extent is really, when you look at it, it's kind of see Calgary has this extreme divergence in between the two, which we'll find out in a second. Maybe there's, different specific challenges for their downtown. See this kind of narrowing gap on Detroit, which I think Eric's kind of shared a little bit with us, but we can maybe get in a little bit more detail. And then Charlotte, it's almost equal across the board, and everyone is semi-happy, I guess, with maybe those results. But let's go back to you then, Kate. And again, it's unique between these two. There's this pretty large gap between downtown vacancies and suburbs. So when we talk about, everyone always automatically goes right to work from home, and that's the root cause. But are you seeing any other factors that might be the reason that you have this gap?
Yeah, and you can see actually kind of in our graph, it's not a new problem for us, the gap between the orange and the gray. And Eric, who's done some work up in Calgary, would know this already, is I mentioned it before, but our downtown was one of the highest populations of head offices in any kind of downtown scenario in Canada, if not North America percentage-wise. And that was driven by our industry for a predominance of oil and gas.
Right.
And so we actually started feeling what everyone felt in 2020 when everyone went home and started working with, button-ups up top and pajamas on the bottom. We actually felt in 2014 when the oil and gas numbers started to fall and head offices shrank, and we had vacancy that topped out over 30% at some point. So we're hovering between 25 and 30 over the last couple of years. But what that allowed our downtown, the city, to look at is, well, what can we do? There was quick adoption about looking at the overall numbers. And I think Calgary approached it in a unique way, rather than solely focusing on conversions, which they've had a strong private-public partnership. So we actually worked with industry. Industry informed the city administration about what's the number that needs to tip the pro forma to make it profitable. And it was really as simple as that. Like what percentage is off between doing these conversions? Because it wasn't a market play, but we knew it was market benefit if there was investment in those conversions for the greater good of the city, which the city would benefit from long term. So the goal was stated, we have 6 million square feet of office space that needs to be removed. And so it's just a different approach, rather than everything needs to be converted. Some of that would be demolition, some of that would be post-secondary, some of that would be office to resi. But it didn't all have to be one solution fits all. So I think that early adoption of that program, 6 million was the goal over 10 years. We've removed 2 million of that square footage. So we are seeing a downward trend, and have for the last 2 to 3 years. So that's been a big part for Calgary, and kind of trying to explain why this graph looks the way it does. It's because of our industry and our reliance on one industry. So it's not actually just in office to residential conversion. It's also about transitioning to a more diversified economy. So how do we start using those office spaces for tech startups? And one of the biggest venture capitalist investments are happening in this city. There's growth on the tech market quite a bit. And that's not just by happenstance. That's kind of a directed goal to transition to a broader economy.
Great, thanks, Kate. Michael, let me jump over to you and throw a question on your thoughts. And this is just kind of more of a broad question, but you told me you're developing office, you're talking about some of these other projects. I mean, does Charlotte envision the demand for office space just continuing to evolve in the coming years? Or is your city in a whole different scenario than other cities that are battling this at this point? Or how How can you elaborate on that?
So we fundamentally believe that there will be restored demand for downtown office space. We don't know how long this kind of disruption occurs, but we're already seeing major employers adding mandatory days back in the office. Truist Financial now is moving to 4 days a week for their employees, 5 days a week for their capital markets group. We've got other major employers that are making those moves. But it's not going to be a binary move. This is a trend that happened abruptly. Any kind of restoration to any other kind of demand patterns is going to take time. And we're seeing, Kate, we've been studying your conversion tools, and I'd love to follow up.
Okay.
And Chuck, to your comment earlier about, we might be happy with these results. The answer is, oh no. I mean, the vacancy rates that we're seeing, we're not happy with. Our partners are not happy with. But downtowns have been stress tested. Pandemic lockdowns, protests, demonstrations, altered work rhythms, inflation, cost of capital, kind of a perfect storm for any real estate market. We've not been spared. We're trying really hard to think about and respond with collective action and shared vision as a community. We think it's built off of making those adaptations that we've been hungry for, from a central business district to a central activity district. We think it's got to be commute worthy. It's got to have entertainment, and it's got to have lifestyle. It's got to be safe. It's got to have exceptional experiences. And that's what we're trying to do. Our center city is maturing as a district. It's been interesting. It just forces meeting at the same time. And I wonder if we're seeing that also in Calgary and Detroit. All of a sudden, there's a lot more concerts. We've got more activity nights at our live music venues, at Bank of America Stadium, at the Spectrum Center, with football and soccer and basketball. And again, a lot more concerts. And it's allowing us to have, when we look at our data on just head counts and unique visits, there is some encouraging news there.
Great. Yep. A lot of experience spending. You just get Taylor Swift, just have her come to the city and everything should be all right. Just have her play
Or just the rumor of it.
Just the rumor of it. That might work as well. Yes.
Seriously, we had a live music festival this weekend, and there was a rumor that she was going to come and show up. And it's funny that alone had an impact.
Well, hey, our time's ticking here, and I know we could have this be actually probably a complete event, but let's just jump forward, because we got 2 more little segments that we wanted to talk about as well. One I thought that was pretty interesting when I kind of again stepped back, and there were some numbers. Unfortunately, I didn't have it for Calgary, Kate. I tried to reach out, but
Right.
the Canadians, for being so nice, didn't want to give me the data, so I wasn't filling the blanks. But there was 2 that kind of stuck out to me, and this is going to come back to you, Eric, and I'll tell you why in the end. Is that there's one is the Industrial Diversity Index. So this is really looking at the economy. It's really the breadth of industries in an area compared to the nationwide average. The nationwide range, I'm sorry, in the US equals 1. So basically the higher, the better. You see Charlotte pretty good at 0.77, Detroit at 0.46. And you have this diffusion index. It basically means how evenly distributed is your job creation, across industries, which is, big as well. Diffusion, so 50 is kind of the level. If you're lower, fewer industries, higher, more industries. So again, Charlotte, more diversity than Detroit. And then you kind of go to the other side, which is the asset allocation part of things. And this we put together an emerging trends in real estate for the last publication, the 2024. We had a trend that was all about portfolios changing their allocation. It's a really big thing. It sounds great. It's easy to write on paper. It's not the easiest thing to do with the capital and have the expertise to do it. And then we just kind of slapped this together. This was an interesting little chart of the NAREIT index. It's the one that was the most, public. 2009, the 5 core sectors made up 58% of the index. There were only 10 sectors that they covered. 2023, 17 sectors. The core is only 45%. So you see capital is obviously going in the other direction. So this kind of was interesting for the fact that there's diversification, economic side of things, and commercial real estate that you're seeing in the industry as a whole. I think with you, Eric, the connection I have is that I'm originally from Pittsburgh. So I grew up blocks from the mill. My dad worked in the mill. My grandfather worked in the mill. And then the mills just disappeared. And then that was it. And then Pittsburgh kind of disappeared for about 15 years. And I feel Detroit, and then they're back and they're great. It's a great city. If you get a chance, check it out. But I feel Detroit's in that same motion, overall, because again, the industry was basically one economic, for the most part,
Yep.
decided piece. So I want to see what you had to think about how crucial it is then to kind of diversify your economies, to keep that resiliency base for this kind of long-term success, and especially for a viable downtown, and is that the direction that Detroit is kind of heading? Sorry to be long-winded on that, but
No, Chuck, I mean, it's spot on. And we did actually have Taylor Swift in for two back-to-back concerts and had 500,000 people come. Only 100,000 of them were actually at the show. The others were waiting to pick up their kids. But no, I mean, that is actually a great point, because what Detroit is really focused on, we know, unlike Michael, I don't have the same level of confidence that our office demand is going to return to, even pre-pandemic, much less, beyond pre-pandemic levels. We're at about 60% of our office occupancy against pre-pandemic today, which, is fairly good. But we also are buoyed a little bit. We had one guy back in 2010 decide to move his business downtown. Name is Dan Gilbert. It was Quicken Loans at the time, now Rocket Mortgage. Fast forward, he brought, he leased 250,000 square feet to come downtown, and now owns 115 different properties in the city, and is driving serious investment in diversity. So, we believe that the resiliency and the stability, especially of our core, is going to be based on a whole host of different investments. We've got $5 billion of investment currently going in the greater downtown corridor. And I would suggest, I can get the actual, the spot on number, but I would suggest 70% of that is hospitality, residential, and innovation technology. We have two higher ed medical investments that make up part of that $5 billion. So one is with the University of Michigan, the other is University of Michigan State. One is, with Stephen Ross. And if you think about what happened in Cambridge when MIT made its first investment 20 years ago, it looked a lot like Detroit. And we hope that, 20 years later, the density and the level of investment that took place around the center of innovation called MIT is going to do the same thing with our University of Michigan Center for Innovation. So I believe wholly that both the entertainment as well as the different sectors are going to drive our resiliency.
It's great to hear. I've only been to Detroit one time, and it was for the Super Bowl, and you guys were the host, which scared me because I don't know why you're hosting a Super Bowl when there's all these warm weather environments to go to, but you guys did a great job. We won.
We had a new stadium, and we hosted the draft last weekend and had 775,000 people here. So yeah,
it was huge. When they panned the camera back, it was packed. It was really unbelievable.
It looked so great, Eric.
It was fun.
It really did. Hey, let's just jump into the last one here because they're going to kick us off in a second. So I want to get to the big thing, which is evolution here. And when we put this together, just kind of a bit of the history of commercial real estate. I'm sure someone will send me an email and tell me that I missed some point going back this far, but whatever. I only know that at the end, for some reason, I don't know why, I put more clouds on the present day and I took out all the trees. So I don't know if that's global warming, that's subliminal in my mind, or something like that. But let's go over to you, Kate, because we got maybe 3 or 4 minutes till we open up till questions. This increased focus on experience spending, which you mentioned before, and entertainment. What role can you see downtown areas kind of playing in this multi-sensory experiences, blending, shopping, dining, activities? I think we've heard some of that before, but it seems to be the direction that everyone's leaning towards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I also like that there's a windmill in your last slide, so giving us a nod to renewable there. But I think if there's what we've all talked about is there's no single solution, and it requires a lot of investment, and it can't just be all public. It is a public-private investment. Those partnerships are going to be what takes us over the line. And I would also add to that argument champions. So Eric, you talked about kind of some developers taking a chance and investing heavily. Having those champions in these districts is critical. you can have any sort of, and whether that's public or private, probably stronger that we've noticed here is having private businesses championing working downtown, championing, having return to work, but also reinvesting in different properties and park space and amenities. So amenitizing our downtowns, giving people a reason to come to downtown. That in Calgary alone, I mean, CMLC, I started at the top that we're overseeing 1.2 billion worth of investment into these nodes, these attractions, the destinations. But in total, I think we're up over 2.5 billion in our city downtown between the arena, other art galleries and others to create a reason for people to come. And that all adds to kind of the range of offerings. So range of experiences, range of price points we touched on, kind of what you can't just have for one economic sector or segment, and having that diversity of opportunity, and making sure that you create retail. Retail has completely changed over the last 5-10 years. It's one of the fastest changing segments of our industry. And how do we enable, we used to just say active streets. Well, that's a really big bucket. And if someone can solve what an active street frontage is and what it could be, and it's not just a coffee shop, and how it's sustainable and how it attracts people to come down. And then I'll just end on programming. One of the things that CMLC does, I think, very effectively is we're involved in building our city, but it's only the first part. When we get to the finish line, we're just opening a $500 million convention center here in Calgary. It'll be the biggest in Western Canada. And we've joked, although it's been about a 5-year process to get here, it's a wild success. It's on time and on budget, which I have to say as a CEO. But also, this is the finish line for us in terms of construction, but the starting line in terms of how we then teach Calgarians and visitors to use it. So programming, making sure that we're activating, activities so people can come to our downtown. It's not just set it and forget it. You have to actively engage with what the future could be.
Michael, maybe we'll throw one more quick one to you. Is that how you're feeling? Similar trends you're seeing in Charlotte?
Well, I couldn't agree more with Kate. And I'd throw one thing in, earlier, my comment about what's occurring with office. By no means let me suggest that we're going to return to what we were. I think we've had an experience that is going to have dramatic and lasting effect. I think it's not going to be most dramatic in the near term, but which I think is maybe overestimated. It's the longer term. There's Amara's law talks about that we overestimate the short term, particularly around technology, while underestimating the long term. I think we have got to bring good long-term thinking to this. And it comes down to the blocking and tackling that it always did for great downtowns. And they are evolving. And we got to use this as an opportunity to accelerate them becoming more complete places, modern urban housing, more affordable housing, variety of academic offerings, leaning into innovation districts around healthcare and technology and kind of tomorrow's jobs, thriving nightlife, just dynamic places that continue to attract talent. It's a talent war, but they love our big cities, and we have a chance to evolve with it.
Great. Eric, you have a couple last comments on evolution at all, or any of those trends that you agree with?
No, I completely agree with Kate and Michael, and I would just say, I mean, for us, we really are focused on sort of 7 things, and I'll just really mention that we are leaning into the remote work and flexible arrangements. I mean, it's here to stay, so we're figuring out how to deal with that. We're looking at economic diversification and really innovation hubs, like I had mentioned. We're talking about resilient infrastructure. So, and everything we're doing, we're trying to focus on sustainable infrastructure, mixed use developments and placemaking. Can't underestimate the importance of sense of place and public spaces, equity and inclusion, mobility, transformation, and then smart cities. Those are the 7 things that every day our organization wakes up and focuses on.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, Eric, Michael, Kate, thank you all for taking the time. I'm going to turn it over to John because he's raising his hand. So I guess there might be some questions out there for you 3. John? It might be on mute, John.
There we go. All right, we do have a couple of questions. Do the panelists have a way to quantify index vibrance?
I can try that one, John. I chair the vibrancy committee here in Calgary for the real estate committee. And we've equated vibrancy to activity. So it's how many people are down and how many activities. We talked about that in terms of programming. So it's an indirect science, but definitely something that we're leaning on is the more people, the more vibrant.
Are there any particular metrics, Kate?
Not right now. It's, been just in the early days of kind of quantifying that, but we are looking at our organization itself hosted 650 programmed events last year alone. And given how many days there are in a year, that's a lot of events in 1 year. So that's one metric to test.
Okay, it sounds like an interesting, index. I hope you'll consider writing for real estate issues when you finalize it, so you can share that with all of us.
Well
Another
played, John.
question. One attribute hurting downtowns has been poor quality public education. How are cities dealing with the need to improve schools if office buildings are converted to multifamily?
John, I mean, from a Detroit perspective, we've wrestled with that significantly. We get a lot of younger people moving into the city, and then they have, families and move out for the schools. So we've been doing, a whole host of things. We're working closely, obviously, with the public school system. We also are doing a lot around the charter school, and then actually individuals within specific neighborhoods have taken it into their own hands and have opened up private schools that are sort of centered around the homeschooling model. So lots of different ways to do it. Ultimately, we've got to, make sure that we're continuing to invest and fix the public school system first and foremost, but we are doing it through both a variety and a selection of alternatives for people, depending on what their specific need is. But it is critical. School is one of the biggest challenges we face in Detroit in retaining our families and our workforce.
John, in Charlotte, we've got a large consolidated school district, about 165, 170,000 students. And we make sure through zoning that we have quality public education opportunities. And we are also working with charter schools and private schools. One thing we're investigating right now is the Cristo Rey model, which was really effective in Chicago. There's now in about 39 markets. We think that holds promise.
Yeah. All right, one final question since we're running out of time here, and this deals with doom loops. It's sort of a broad question, so I don't know how quickly we're going to be able to answer this. Are there any proactive policies or approaches that will address a doom loop? Doom loop meaning that as the tax base declines because of the decline in values of the empty office buildings, and the property taxes decline, the services decline, and it forms a doom loop. Do you guys have any suggestions or proactive policy approaches to deal with a city once it enters into a doom loop?
Well, John, I mean, just real quickly, and I'll let the others answer, but, obviously 10 years ago, we went through the largest municipal bankruptcy in the country. And so we're not, looking to go back into a doom loop again. And we've done a few things. I mean, one, the property owners have voluntarily taxed themselves through a business improvement zone to make sure that there is a baseline level of services above and beyond, what the city and the public sector is providing. We also have pivoted. I mean, 40% of our general fund is through property taxes, and we're making sure that the property taxes, whether it's through some of these other activities and services, continues to grow and be stable. And then the last is we're driving lots of investment into entertainment. We have 34 million people that come into the city of Detroit on an annual basis. Every one of those has a spend, and we're making sure that we maximize that spend.
John, I would say we need to bring innovation and urgency. If we try to address these challenges through existing tools and market forces, this is going to be a rust belt kind of experience for downtowns across North America. And we need new tools. We need creativity. We need to move from fear to greed and let market forces help us solve this.
Kate, got anything?
You're muted, Kate.
You're muted, Kate.
Again.
I think I read
Um,
your lips on the last one.
There you go. Well done. That was a test. No, I think well said by my fellow panelists. I think very similar in Calgary. But it's about looking again about what the mix is, making sure there's diversity of mix in our downtowns. Calgary, from a policy standpoint, enabling a shift of taxation in terms of what percentage is on commercial buildings versus suburban residential properties. And that's been a debate and a conversation around here to make sure that we understand that our downtown represents our city. And so though many people do live in the suburban areas, the core is where the investment of activities has happened. And it is what's seen as Calgary. When you talk about how do you see Calgary, it's the Calgary Stampede. It's all the things that are happening around it. We just did a rebranding exercise and we are calling our city the Blue Sky City. So we have over 333 days of blue sky sunshine in our city, but also a lot of potential. But that potential is underpinned with the diversity factor. So I think it's all of those things.
John, I would just
Well,
say that, downtowns are like nature. They don't like monocultures.
There you go. Thank you all for this very informative presentation this afternoon. Recognizing that there is an enormity of problems, adversity often enables innovation and opportunity. Although these are challenging times, as inveterate problem solvers, counselors of real estate are prepared and equipped to identify solutions to complex real estate problems. Moreover, our public service initiatives, the CRE Consulting Corps and the CRE Foundation, afford localities a potent combination of expertise and funding to devise frameworks for decision-making. I would encourage you to explore these valuable resources and to consider engaging a CRE professional for help when solutions to complex real estate matters like we've been discussing today are needed. In closing, please join us on June 18th for our most popular webinar of the year featuring the Counselor's Esteemed Economic Advisory Council. You can register for that presentation at cre.org. Until then, on behalf of the Counselors of Real Estate, we thank you for attending this session of What's Next for Real Estate and Life Experiences. We look forward to seeing you again and have a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks again to the panelists.